deeply honored to have a visit from the leader of the Nation of Islam, one of the most prominent voices of consciousness and voices for grassroots downtrodden on the planet. We are very pleased and honored to have with us the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan here back at his Zinc Friends. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Brother Mose. I'm very, very honored to be here with you and Sister Sharon.
I want to say, as this, or Latin friends would say, on behalf of my father, who's the chairperson of an side, and the entire family of Commandola, Casa is
Thank you very much.
I want to say that usually I would find myself, when I have a guest, to be more a journalist and to be an interviewer, an interrogator. But this morning I want to say that this segment of the show, really I and the family of the Mandela present to you as a platform for you to speak to all listeners and all viewers and to express yourself on this historic third visit to our country. This compound sits on the over 40 years coming out of the womb of our black revolutionary process, and we now boast of the nation's leading newspaper, the nation's most powerful radio, and definitely most conscious television station. So you are at home, my brother, and it's yours.
Well, first, dear brother and sister, let me say to the wonderful people of Belize, I'm very, very honored and grateful to Almighty God, Allah, for the privilege of being here on my third visit. I didn't realize that I had been away for 27 years. And I want to thank Brother Nuri, Muhammad, and the Muslim community, Brother Irwin and Brother Rahman, for their wonderful invitation to me. And I'm so grateful for the friendship and the brotherhood that I have received. I want you, though, to be the wonderful interrogator, a journalist, because you bring out of me the best of me if you interrogate me. So I don't want there to be a change in the wonderful way you have run your program. I like questions. I like interrogation because you know the country better than I. You know the needs of the country and the people better than I. So I am here as a servant, and if you help me with your interrogation, then I might say things that I wouldn't ordinarily say. But let me start by saying, usually some would say good morning, but it might not necessarily be a good morning if you woke up this morning and you didn't have a job, you lost a loved one through some accident or disease. And if it's not a good morning, maybe it won't be a good evening. But the best greeting that I could give to the people of Belize is a greeting word of peace. Jesus, whenever he met his disciples or left his disciples, he always said, peace be with you. And that's the best greeting that I could give on my third visit. I offer you peace. Peace means that whatever comes from my lips, from my heart, is to increase your knowledge and your ability to solve the complex problems, hopefully, of the country, or of your home to bring black people in particular together in a more loving spirit. And since Belize, since the last time I was here, has become more and more cosmopolitan, more and more people from different parts of the world, then we must, as black people who are the fathers of all people, find a way to bring all our children in the family into unity, and there Belize will become a great power in the region. Now I submit to Brother Mose and Sister Sharon for your questions.
Because of the way things tend to be, Honorable Minister, I did not hear your words that you spoke in Belize in 1986 until last year. I knew you were here in 1986, but I never saw a script. I never heard audio. I never saw video until somebody posted up the video on YouTube. And I listened attentively and watched. And when it was completed, and at that time you were scheduled to be here in December, I said, the Honorable Minister is going to be maybe disappointed because the things you were saying in 1986 that you were advising us to avoid, the traps, the pitfalls, we have, at close inspection, at the state of our nation, we have kind of walked right into them. And I said that would be one of the things that I would ask the Honorable Minister about disappointment. And not only as it relates to just Belize, but you've been on the front line for a very long time, you've been speaking truth to power for such a long time, and yet we see and we are bombarded with images of our failures, of just not getting it right. How do you look at disappointment? Firstly, in the context of comparing your words in 1986 to where we have gone as a nation, speaking of Belize, and then in a more global sense, knowing what you would have wanted to see your people choose, the direction that people should have gone compared to the choices they have made.
Thank you for the question. Every man that God gives a message to advance a people, our hope is always that the people will hear the message, respond properly to the message, so that the condition that that messenger or that teacher found the people in would be greatly improved. My mother, as a great West Indian mother, always told me, a hard head make a soft behind. So we don't always listen to our teachers. And then there's another factor that we have to consider. Those that are in power, and I'm not speaking necessarily of black government. I'm speaking of those powers that manipulate black government, that keep black governments in debt and therefore enslaved by debt. I'm talking about powerful forces that feel that our rise would produce their fall. So they must always fight against any teacher that will enlighten the people and give the people that power to change the reality of their condition. So in 1986, when I was blessed to be here, I said what I said based upon my understanding of the condition of black people. This time that I'm here, and there has not been significant change, it's due sometimes to our rebellion to do what is right, but it's also due to the powerful opposition to our rise. In the scriptures of the Bible, Jesus said, I have piped to you all the day long, and you have not danced. And I have mourned unto you, and you have not lamented. What is he saying? Well, when I came in the studio, I heard a beautiful Belizean calypso, and I was attracted by the rhythm. And naturally, when you hear the rhythm of calypso, the rhythm of salsa, the rhythm of merengue, you want to move. You can't help yourself. But the rhythm of truth that forces us to change certain realities. The Bible says of us, we're stiff-necked, hard-hearted, and rebellious people. But guess what? That won't last long, because the condition that we are in now is getting worse by the day. The country is sinking into the abyss of poverty and want and violence and bloodshed and hatred and gang conflict. Debt is burdening the government. How long can we survive like this? So again, the Bible in the book of Ezekiel, it talks about these dry bones in the valley. And these bones heard a word from the Son of Man, and these bones just refused to come together. So the Son of Man got upset. He went back to the Lord and said, Lord, I've been talking to these people, and they shake a little, they rattle a little, but they won't come together. And the Lord comforted the Son of Man and said, you prophesy unto the winds, and let the winds blow on these bones. And the winds blew. And the winds are blowing, Brother Mose, the winds of poverty and want and bitter disappointment and neglect. Disease and death is over the people. So these winds that are blowing makes us think, wait a minute, I heard a message in 1986. There have been many. Your dad has been writing prolific columns in the newspaper trying to wake the people up. They read, they understand, they try, and then their movement is crushed or whatnot. Not today. The winds are going to blow so hard as the foot bone connected to the ankle bone, connected to the leg bone, the hip bone, the backbone. We're going to come together, because that's the only way we can solve our problem. And about the word disappointment, I've been doing this for 57 years. I'll be 80 years old, God willing, in the next 2 months. And the old saying, I ain't no ways tired. Why? Because I know that even though there's a tendency to be disappointed, I know we're going to respond. You may not respond when we would like you to respond, but you will respond, because the only other answer is total destruction. And I don't think we want to be totally destroyed. I don't think we want to see Belize suffer more and more. I think we want to see Belize rise, and I also think we want to see the region rise, not only the Central American region, but the Caribbean region. And the only way we can rise is to come together in unity and share our knowledge, pool our resources, and we'll change our reality.
Oftentimes we look at the experiences of an individual who has led an amount of people. And like Mose, I too had not seen that video, audio, anything of your visit in 1986 to Belize. At that time I would have been 12 years old and I wasn't even aware that you were here. But after seeing that video, I think it prepared me for events that happen in our country that you may not be aware of. Recently we had a call for land demonstration, a call for land reform, and a good bulk of your speech on that day spoke about land and Belizeans understanding the value of land and respecting what it can do for us and how we can move forward and become really independent, because being independent is not just saying a word, it's by your actions. And we had some disappointments with that land demonstration that happened recently, the amount of people that came out, the people that responded to the message. But then I look at a part of your resume, long, a lot of accomplishments, achievements, one of which you were able to get 130 mosques back on track in America after the Nation of Islam was disbanded. And I thought to myself, what a task it must have been. I find that when somebody accomplishes so much, it is only fitting that they share a little bit of that journey with those who are freedom fighters, who are trying to accomplish the like in their society. It may not be reopening mosques, it may not be uniting a million people, but in their own right, in their own country, it's just as significant. So I would really be honored if you would share with us just a bit of that experience.
Well, coming up in a West Indian home, no father, but a very strong black mother. My father was a follower of the Right Honorable Marcus Garvey. My mother was on the fringe of the movement. I have no recollection of my father, but I thank God for him, because it is his seed that germinated the egg in the womb of my mother, and she brought me forth, and she nurtured me to love black people. My love for our people has been so strong all my life that when I was a little boy in church, in the Sunday school they would talk to me about how Moses delivered the children of Israel, and they would talk about these great ones that God sent to suffering people. And I would ask my Sunday school teacher, if God did all of this for others, and we are suffering a tremendous persecution and oppression in America, why wouldn't God send someone to us? And my teacher had no answer for that. And so I started looking. I had an uncle from St. Kitts that lived in New York, and on the mantelpiece in my home, my mother being a British subject, she had King George and Queen Elizabeth on the mantelpiece, and there was a picture of Jesus, the Savior, and he was white. Well, I had no problem with that, but when I went to my uncle's home, I saw no white people at all on his mantelpiece. So I looked up, there was a black man on the wall. I said, who is that man? He said, that's a man that came to unite our people. Well, I was 11 years old, so I stood on a chair to look up in this man's face, and I said, where is he, that I might go and see him? He said, unfortunately, he's dead. And the tears fell from my eyes, and that was a picture of Marcus Garvey. I say that to say this. If you studied your father, and I'm sure you have, and you study great leaders that come to help us, they all suffer some form of privation, disappointment, prison, and Dr. King assassinated, Malcolm X assassinated. But what is the driving force that keeps Mr. Hyde writing? What is the driving force that keeps you doing what you do on this radio station, day after day, week after week, month after month, year after year? Something that's in the breast of love for God, love for your people, love for truth. And there's a scripture that says, perfect love casteth out fear. Most of the people that suffer, they have no courage to stand up for something bigger than themselves. With me, Sister Sharon, my love for black people, and particularly my love for the Honorable Elijah Muhammad and the great work that he did, would not allow me to allow his name to be written out of history, because all his works were like buried. So I decided to try and rebuild his work, even though I could have been killed. My family could have been killed. And even today, there are those who hate the message that will lift black people. So your life is always hanging in the balance. But those who fight for a cause bigger than themselves, their life is not a vain existence. So they never die. When you live beyond yourself, you live in that which goes on after you cease to be. And so that is why my work, God has blessed it with a degree of success. But one day I was with my teacher, and a young man was sitting at the table, and he talked about a few people that had accepted the faith, and Elijah Muhammad did this. He said, I didn't send you to a mosque, I sent you to a city. Have you conquered the city? He said, no. Have you conquered the state? Man said, no. He said, well, honor does not come until the job is done. So I take all the steps. People honor me with this, honor me with that. I thank them, but the job is not done. So I'm finite. If I live a little longer, by God's grace, I'll continue to work. But now I'm preparing young men, young women, strong young men and women to carry the work on. I already see that we're going to win. Belize is going to win. I know it. The oppressive power that keeps Belize down, keeps us arguing and fighting with each other, keeps Africa down. They're on their way out. I know it. So when I preach the end of this that is called white supremacy and black inferiority, that's going to end. And when it ends, those of us who've been fighting to see our people rise, that opposition that is formidable, it will be gone. And the path for our success will be more bright, more easy.
Honorable Minister, when you speak and you say to people, this system is not going to last forever. It's going to come down. This is not indefinite. And as you said, you prophesy to the fact that you see victory ahead. There are times when somebody interprets that and says, well, that means that I can just sit down and wait to see that. Because the Honorable Minister says it's going to come down, we're going to win, so we're just going to wait for victory day.
That person will never see the victory. Because I'm not saying that we're going to win so everybody can sit down and say, well, we're going to win. No. You know, Jesus put it like this, or they have a song in the church, must Jesus bear the cross alone and all the world go free? No, there's a cross for you and there's a cross for me. So I'm on my cross. I'm working. You got to get up and take yours, because it's going to be all of us working together toward the victory that we'll see the victory.
We had Brother Nuri Muhammad with us on Thursday, it would have been, Brother Nuri. And I asked, because I must say, it was quite a profound moment watching the video from 1986, and that's why we visited. And I looked at standing room only audience that was there on the bird's eye, and I can't imagine it's going to be any less crowded this time around. So I know that our people love your message, and I know they will be there to get the message again. But my generation has to look at those people and say, well, there's a responsibility when you hear a message to know that the action is not in attending the event that gave you the message. It is not the action. The action follows the message. Is it cultural? Is it a flaw where we get this euphoric feeling about the message? We get mesmerized, but don't get down and get dirty afterwards, because the message says get dirty. But we just get a high off the message.
As long as there are people like you, as long as there are people like your dad, as long as there are people like Nuri Muhammad, you can't sleep on a good message. Others wait for somebody else to make a way for them. And the Honorable Elijah Muhammad said to us, blessed is the man or woman who forges the way for others. So in every audience, there'll be those that do this. Right on, brother. Great message. But there's others who say, man, I'm getting up from here and I'm going to work. And that's where leadership is demonstrated. You know, dear brother, our young people are the finest generation that we have ever produced. They may not look like it now. They're born warriors. They're tired of their elders who say the good word but don't do the good work. In America, after, segregation gave us benefit because we had to take our money, spend it with our own. So we had banks, we had insurance companies, we had bus companies, we had hotels and motels and restaurants and farms and small factories. But the moment the enemy saw, look at the money that we are missing because they're spending that money among themselves and building institutions. So then came integration. And because we could be approved by our former slave masters and their children, and it looked like all of a sudden our enemies had become our friends, we went to spend our money in their hotels, in their motels, in their restaurants, and all of a sudden our economy began to die. So here we are in America right now with an annual income this year, they say, of $1.1 trillion. That would make us the 7th to the 9th largest economy in the world. Other nations have schools, factories, farms, hospitals. What do we have? Nothing. So somehow now the old generation has dropped the ball. If I may say, in the Quran and in the Bible, Moses was telling the people, look, God is going to give you a land. But there were some giants in the land. So the elders told Moses, say, well, look, Moses, there are giants, and I ain't going in that land until you and your God clean those giants out. So God told Moses, let them wander in the wilderness until they die out, and I will take their children, and they will inhabit the promised land. I'm saying that, Brother Mose, to say this. This generation of young people is the generation of promise. And because the enemies know that, in every Caribbean island and in all the nations, you find it's the youth that are the revolutionaries. In Tahrir Square, in Cairo, Egypt, look at the faces of the people. It's the young. In Bahrain, it's the young. In Syria, it's the young. In Libya, it's the young. In Belize, it's the young. So how do you engage the young so they destroy each other? So that there will never be a future where Belize will come to real power. You kill the youth. You kill that warrior spirit in the youth by putting guns in their hands and drugs in their hands. No jobs for them. Then you pit them against each other. So everywhere I have gone, it's the young who are killing each other to the joy of our enemies. So what you raised, you would never sit on a good message. You heard it just a week or so ago, and you said, wow, Farrakhan said these things 27 years ago, and we have not acted. Not you. Your generation is the generation to act. And it is the acting of a young generation, a new generation, a generation that is not tied to false power. The Westminster system of government is not right for us. It's okay. It's a transition to when we become truly independent. As long as the Queen is the boss, well, you're not totally free. As long as their system of government is our system of government, we're not totally free. If we can go in and put a wig on our head to give justice to the people, whose head is that? Whose wig is that? Whose mind is that? Whose spirit is that? That's the spirit of the same people that enslaved our fathers and colonized us. We have to be severed from that completely. But this is transition. We're on the way. No, Mose, you will lead.
Honorable Minister, before we go to break, when a part of this Belize trip is really a part of a bigger process of trying to get the Caribbean to come together. We look to South America and we see where there's been a strong wind of change, where people's powered agenda has really taken root in governance in Venezuela, Bolivia, even Argentina. We look, but we look in the Middle East and we see the winds of change. But when we look to the Caribbean and we look to Central America, we seem not to be on that rhythm. We seem to be, like you have some people who like the song but can't catch the beat. Well, it seems like we're not catching the beat, Honorable Minister.
Yes.
What message do you have to leaders of CARICOM, leaders of SICA, about catching the beat, about realizing that the old way of thinking about your little personal territory and your little ego, you must have some humility in leadership and see that there's a better way for your people.
I'm looking at you, my brother, and I see the future. I'm encouraged by the way you question me. I'm encouraged by your spirit. Your spirit is the spirit of the future. I was in Jamaica, and I met with Mr. P.J. Patterson, the former Prime Minister. I met with Edward Seaga, the former Prime Minister, and I talked or asked the question about the unity of the Caribbean. He said, well, Mr. Seaga said he never thought that would happen. Mr. P.J. Patterson, beautiful brother, he said it's possible. I was in Barbados. I met the Prime Minister, the opposition leader, and I see that spirit. They're beginning to realize no island and none of these little small nations in Central America can survive independent. So you get your little flag, you get your seat on the United Nations, and you feel, yes, we sing our national anthem. I read the beautiful national prayer of Belize. But prayers unanswered mean nothing. When you pray, then what? You must get up and act on the words of your prayer, and with the help of the God that you're praying to, your unity will accomplish the goal. So I can tell you, brother, the Caribbean will not survive unless there's unity. I was in Cuba. Cuba is a great nation, but suffering tremendously from the embargo of the North. Why do they suffer? They suffer because Fidel Castro took the land from the rich, who dispossessed the poor and worked the poor for the riches of a few to the detriment of the many. Fidel Castro felt this was unjust. He rose. If you ask Fidel Castro, what are you? He looks white. He says, I'm mestizo. Well, we have all of these ranges now of color. You have the mestizo, you have the mulatto, you have the Creole, you have the Indian, the Asian, the Arab, the white, the black. All here, all in Central America. British colonized this. Britain enslaved this. So we speak English. But we have to teach Spanish. We have to teach French. Because if we don't know the language, we can't unite this beautiful Central America. And if we know Spanish, if we know French, then we can take the whole of the Caribbean, including Cuba. And when you look at the Caribbean, how it washes Venezuela, it washes Guyana, it washes Colombia, it washes the one next to Guyana. Wait a minute.
You gotta go to them.
Suriname. Thank you. All of these countries I was blessed to visit, and everywhere I leave a message. You know, you heard a message that I spoke 27 years ago. I could be dead now, but the message lives. That's the important thing. And when you heard it, you knew it was a call to you and your generation and a younger generation to rise up and make a difference. And that's happening all over the world. So now in the Caribbean, I left a message of unity of the Caribbean. Jesse Jackson one day said, "It is better to be the tail of something than the head of nothing." So here we are, the head of a little place. And we feel good, you know, I'm the prime minister, I'm the foreign minister, I'm this, I'm that. But only when there's a federation of these nations coming together that we'll have the power to throw off the yoke that has kept us in the condition where we are. So I pray. How old are you now, sir?
I'm 42.
Beautiful. You know, Moses got his mission when he was 40. So you are in the age now to accept leadership. You have it in your heart. You have it over the airwaves. Translate the airwaves now into all of the wonderful people in this most conscious radio station. Make them to come up now. Organize them and become a power to change reality. And with Sister Sharon at your side, and the thousands of Sharons that are out there that are seeing their children die. Over 500 murders in 4 years in Belize City. Belize City. We got to stop this. But we have the power to do it if we work together. I would love, while I'm here, before they go to break and the airwaves are open for your questions, dear brothers and sisters, and particularly the pastors, the imams, you are the potential freers of the minds of your people. Pastors, we have to come together on that true gospel of Jesus, or the true teachings of the Quran, and become a unified spiritual force to ignite the people. Rastafari, all of us who believe in a superior power, We must come together and unite the people. The future is not in the hands of government. The future is in our hands if we seize it and go to work. You have inspired me this morning just by your questions and your statements.
You flatter me.
I don't believe in flattery. but I'm seeing and I'm feeling a leader coming to birth.
Honorable Minister, with your permission, we go to break.
Thank you.
We are very honored to have with us this morning the leader of the Nation of Islam, Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan. He's been with us since 8 o'clock, and he'll be here with us until 9, and we'll see if we can squeeze in a couple questions. Before we start to accommodate the questions, first of all, let me say to the mighty Lord Rayburn that Minister Farrakhan is thoroughly enjoying your WUB song. And Honorable Minister, before we start to accommodate the calls, we find very often in Belize, and maybe it's similar in other small nation states, that we tend to be very local with the things that we're engaged in, or local politics or local challenges. If we were to begin talking about regional issues or global issues here on our talk show, people might not be so involved. But it's important for us to put our challenges in the context of what is taking place around the globe. And one of the incidents that I think we took very little notice of and have very little understanding of is the assassination of Muammar Gaddafi in Libya. And in fact, most of my enlightenment on the issue has come through what I've watched and listened to on YouTube with your presentations. For the benefit of our listeners and viewers and for ourselves, could you just, as best you can, because I imagine it's difficult to put an issue like that in just a small time frame, but as best you can, tell us what that meant for us as a people.
Muammar Gaddafi is an Arab Muslim, but he recognized that black people would come to the forefront in the future. And in his green book, he talked about blacks prevailing in the world. Excuse me. So he wanted to see Africa united from the Cape to Cairo. 53 nations as one great nation. This was the hope of Osagyefo Kwame Nkrumah. It was the hope of Mr. Padmore from Trinidad. It was the hope of Marcus Garvey. Now, Gaddafi went to work with oil dollars, and he inspired revolutions and helped revolutions all over the world. So he was hated by the government of the United States and England and those former great colonial powers. Gaddafi, he was my brother and a friend. That man had engineers and scientists who found water under the desert. He spent over $30 billion bringing water up out of the desert and bringing water from Benghazi all the way almost to the Tunisian border. And that land, that desert began to become green. He bought tractors and implements of cultivation and offered land to the Libyan people if they were willing to farm. I was with him when our hands, his hand, Brother President Jerry John Rawlings' hand, the President of Niger, and my hand, when we touched a button that caused the water to spring up and flow. That man had a country with no debt. He used the money of oil and was building infrastructure. No Libyan was without an apartment, without a home. No Libyan. He took oil money and gave the Libyans every year a stipend from oil. He sent his people to study all over the world at the expense of the Libyan government. And if you were sick and you needed an operation that their doctors could not do, anywhere you went for that operation, you could go and the Libyan government would take care of it. He was labeled a dictator because he did not want England or France or America or Europe to tell them how to run their government. He had 146 tons of gold, no debt, and he helped Africa put up a $500 million satellite that we who would call from different parts of the world to Africa, we always had to go through Europe. Now we could go direct to Africa, and $500 million a year stayed in African hands. He put $80 billion in an African development bank so that Africans could bypass the World Bank, the IMF, and borrow money from the African Development Bank at a very small interest. He was going to set up a Caribbean Development Bank, put up $1 billion in St. Kitts for the Caribbean to borrow money at very small interest to build. The man was an impediment to Western designs on Africa. And so, unfortunately, his overthrow of the king, who was from the Benghazi area, never set well with the people in that area. So when he came in out of the cold and gave up his weapons of mass destruction, America went in and started nursing the opposition in Benghazi. And from Benghazi, the revolt took place. And he was fighting, of course, to maintain power. But America and the propaganda machine, he's killing his people, he's bombing them, he's this. Yeah. And then they made sure that he was dead. And after he was dead, AFRICOM, which is from the United States Department of Defense, the Pentagon, has now sent troops, American troops. And now havoc is going on throughout Africa. You see France in Mali. You see France coming in, England coming in. Well, all of this is leading to the Third World War, Armageddon, that is written of in the Bible. This final war which will break the power of the former colonial and imperialist powers. That is my take on Muammar Gaddafi, and I know that getting rid of Gaddafi, they also have the same desire for any strong leader. So I thank you for asking me that question. Maybe I'll have more time during my lectures while I'm in the country to speak on him He was a great leader, brother.
Honourable Minister, let's see with the time remaining if we can get in a couple calls. So if there's someone online right now, Anthony? Okay. KREM, good morning. WB.
Good morning, Honorable Minister Farrakhan.
Good morning, sir.
Just for our little situation here, sir, I wonder what could Belize do? And, you know, I'm so glad to see you on the TV this morning, because I was just talking to Mo before you came on about getting some Hollywood movie stars, the people behind the American propaganda machine, to actually help us in our fight for independence. America and Britain control Guatemala, you know, and I don't know if you've been keeping up with the political situation here in Belize, sir, but the Guatemalan people are not free. They are a total abject slaves of the British and the Americans. And Britain and America obviously want us to return to that state. I mean, we got rosewood, we got oil, we got uranium. And
okay, well, let's
we have decimated our seas completely.
Okay,
what is your question, my dear brother?
Minister Farrakhan, sir, what could we do to get our question, to get a reaffirmation of our right to be an independent, sovereign country? I mean...
Okay, let's get an answer to the question, sir.
Thank you. The power of the United States is all over Central America, the Caribbean, and South America. We have a few nations that are coming together to become sovereign. Sovereignty is not a flag and a national anthem and a seat on the United Nations. Sovereignty means you have absolute control of the resources of your nation, and you are not indebted to powers. Any nation that is in debt is a nation that is enslaved. No matter what we have in Belize or what is had in Guatemala, you know, if we are in debt, then what is the collateral that supports a debt? So when we borrow money, which most of the nations are borrowing money to develop their infrastructure, to do many progressive things, but the debt that has with it interest rates sometimes that are exorbitant do not, and then when you default on your ability to pay the loan, your sovereignty then is in question, because the collateral for the loan has to do with what you have under your foot. If you have uranium here, if you have gold, whatever you have, when you have debt, that you have is collateral for the debt. Your sovereignty is collateral for the debt. So what must we do in Belize? What must we do in Guatemala, in Nicaragua, in Costa Rica, in all of these beautiful Central American nations? We have to find that path to unity. First, the blacks in this country are divided against self. You used to be the majority population. I understand that we are no longer that. That's by design. Our women have been taught to use birth control, and now the killing of our young people, the food that's coming in, even though your agricultural sector is strong, but it is not strong enough to feed 380,000 Belizeans. So where are you getting your food? Why are we suffering from cancers that we didn't have before, diabetes that we didn't have before, amputations because of diabetes, blindness, heart disease, stress. All of this we are suffering now because the enemy is feeding us. And until we can take our mouths out of the kitchen of our enemy and begin growing our own food to feed ourselves, and then you sell the surplus. But if you are not feeding yourself and somebody else is bringing food in, they're killing you, and then the debt is killing. So unity is the way to get out from under all of the powers that are oppressing and suppressing our development. I pray for Guatemala, I pray for Nicaragua, for Panama, for all of this region, and I pray for the Caribbean. Most of the blacks here have some roots in the Caribbean, and therefore as Belize grows, you must learn Spanish. You must learn that language so we can connect with our people in Central America, South America, the Caribbean. Our unity will give us power to throw off the yoke of imperial powers.
1 hour is just too short a time, but for sure we have great appreciation and gratitude that you have taken out of your very intense itinerary to spend the 60 minutes with us this morning here. We call it back to the zinc fence here inside the WB. Honorable Minister, we're very honored that you visited us and we enjoyed very much the conversation.
Thank you from the depth of our heart for being here, for meeting you and Sharon, and through the two of you meeting a host of wonderful people in Belize. But I hope that something that God may have guided my heart and my spirit to say will inspire young people, particularly of Belize, to rise and stop the fratricide and come under leadership that loves you and that will give you good guidance, that you may change this reality that we talked about today.
And I need to mention that as powerful as the Honorable Minister has been this morning, that it's really, the meal has not yet even been served. It's really just to prep you for the main course that shall be served at various places. And of course the keynote address of this visit is going to take place at the Bird's Isle this Friday evening. And I know one of the things that has happened, Brother Noe, is that because the campaign has been so high, folks have kind of had a little feeling that maybe there's a charge to get into these events, and that there's no such thing. It's free to come in and attend and to be in the presence and to be there for this most important message. So let not your heart be troubled when it comes to any fee that you're supposed to put forward. There's none. With that said, we are going to take a final break, I think. Huh? Yes. We will take our last break and then we will come back and wrap, Anthony. So we'll take our last break and we say again, it was quite an honor having you here, Honorable Minister.